You know, niggas gotta get their priorities together. Got their mind on the wrong things, spending their money in the wrong way.
Trapaholics, real trap shit.
Say you need that car with the rims and a charm, just like Jim. It's more than life. Yeah.
I'm telling you. Talk to him.
Say you need that LV bag
For what?
with the belt and the hat.
That's all you got though.
It's more than life. Yeah.
Talk to him. Real.
Say you wanna turn up at the club,
Why?
buy some bottles, impress them girls.
what?
It's more than life.
Oh, fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And who dat? And I'm Ethan. And as you can see, there's no more beard here. No more beard here. All I'm rocking is the Joe Dirt mullet. It's getting pretty long now. I planned on getting it cut eventually. Just take it down a little bit, take it up a little bit here, and get this out of my eyes here. But yeah, the beard that I had for the whole football season and the majority of the wintertime, it really took away. It took away from the mullet. But now you can really see it now. But besides that, enough with that. I also want to give a shout out to a new subscriber, and I just want to shout out William Spragu. I really appreciate you subscribing, and just to anyone else, I say it anytime I do get subscribers, that if you subscribe and you got your own channel and I can figure out who you are, I'll give you a shout out, because I really do appreciate people that want to follow my channel and want to listen to what I have to say, and yeah, any likes, subscribes, comments. I like hearing comments too. So I really appreciate that, William. Thanks for subscribing. But other than that, got the hair out of the way, got the beard out of the way, got a shout out of the way. This is kind of the dead period of the season, but there's still a little bit going on with the Saints restructuring and still kind of on the Derek Carr watch. But anyways, we'll get into that right now. So can I get a menu? And so the Saints, that this whole week here, that they've really been going hard at restructuring contracts. I'll just go through these real quick of the players that they've already restructured, and maybe mention some that they might be thinking about. So we on the last podcast we already talked about Marcus May. They restructured his contract, and when they're restructuring, they're basically just turning their majority of their base contract into a signing bonus, which gives you some cap relief. And so first one is just Marcus May. He restructured and that saved the Saints $4.9 million. And then they did pretty much the same thing. They did the same thing with Eric McCoy and saved $10 million there. And then I was mentioning that they're probably looking to restructure a player like Ryan Ramczyk, and they did. They got to Ryan Ramczyk. And that cleared $2.336 million. And then this is a little bit of a different one here, not necessarily a restructure, but it looks to me that Will Lutz outright took a pay cut, and that took him from a $3.4 million base salary all the way down to 1.5. So that's interesting. I'll have something to say about that here in a second. And the last one is Tyrann Mathieu, which he came restructured for $4.668 million. And I think from what I've seen, they're like, before all this, they were like about 65 million over the cap. And that right there clears a big chunk, all those players. That's like a total of 31.4 million. and cuts and cap relief there. So that's big. But just out of these players, I first want to just talk about Will Lutz because that's interesting that he took uh, such a big pay cut, and I guess it shouldn't come as too much of a surprise to anybody, just because he for a kicker that started all 17 games last year, he had like the worst stats of any kicker. He only had a 64.2 percent field goal percentage, and he actually made all of his extra points, which that was something that was terrible having to deal with in previous years. And I think it's so funny that I was mentioning their other kicker that they had signed in last year. What was his name? Jake for the Cowboys kicker. Now I can't remember his name. Real quick. Brett Maher, because I was just at the end of the season, I was talking about how the Saints could have had Brett Maher last year, and he was like ended up being like 90% from field goal range for the Cowboys, and he had like close to like Pro Bowl numbers for them during the regular season, and how he was so terrible for the Saints in 2021. And yeah, right after like mentioning that and praising Brett Maher and wishing that the Saints maybe could have swapped him with the production of Will Lutz, because I think if you take Will Lutz's field goal percentage from 74.2 to 90 something, and I think a lot of those field goals that he actually made were like 50 plus yarders. I think he made like 9 or 10 of them. I was saying, Al, if we could have had that production, the Saints probably would have made the playoffs. I imagine they would have won another game or two. But all that praising of Brett Maher, then go into the playoffs. Well, he misses like 5 of 6 extra points in that game, like 3 in a row, and he just looked terrible, kicking extra points at least. So it's just I feel like I almost jinxed him by talking about him and kind of downplaying Will Lutz and talking him up. But yeah, I don't think if he was a Saint, I don't think he would have been any better. His numbers probably would have continued to similar what they were in the previous year, because that was something he had an issue when he was with the Saints for a couple of games, was missing extra points, which is maddening when you are score right after you score a touchdown and then you miss the extra point. That just deflates the team, or at least that's how I feel. But yeah, this pay cut, outright pay cut, I feel Will Lutz probably realized that he had a bad season last year, and probably knows that he kind of had to take that pay cut, because that making 3.4 million for a kicker, I think that was right under the Ravens kicker. Justin Tucker, right under what he's making, because I'm pretty sure he's the highest paid kicker, and if he continues on the pace that he is, he might end up being a Hall of Famer, making 67-yard field goals and crazy stuff like that. But I think Will Lutz realized that he had a bad year last year, and pretty much had no option of whether to stay on the team at his current price, or stay on and take the pay cut, or probably get cut. So if nothing else, that guarantees him a spot to probably compete with some young kicker in training camp this coming up in the spring and early fall, is what I would imagine. And then the other player that I wanted to mention, which is good to see, most of the time when a player does a restructure instead of a pay cut like that, that usually guarantees them a spot on the team. And the one I wanted to point out there was already talked about Marcus May, but talking about the other safety and Tyrann Mathieu, which, man, a lot of people kind of had issues with how he played at the beginning of the year, and how he was missing tackles and how there were big plays being given up. But honestly, once he kind of settled in towards the back half of the season, he was actually pretty good. So I mean, uh, I think that's kind of good. That kind of leaves it to where you're not necessarily needing to draft a safety because now you have your two safeties from last year locked in with Marcus May and Tyrann Matthew. But Tyrann Matthew, he led the team with interceptions with three of them, had 8 pass deflections, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery, a sack, 91 tackles, which I think that was the most ever in his career, 64 solo, uh, 27 assists, 3 tackles for loss, and a quarterback hit. Like he really came together. He seemed like he became a lot more comfortable towards the end of the season. So I think I'm happier that we know that he's going to be back than probably Marcus May because at least with Tyrann Matthew, at least he was healthy. Because I mean that's a big deal in today's game. Being able, it's just such a long season now. I know it's just one more game, but playing in all 17 games and starting all 17 games, that's just something you can rely on. And then talk about some other players that the Saints could have some options at restructures. I guess if you restructured Cam Jordan, you could maybe save 10 million, and then Marshawn Lattimore another 10 million if you restructured, and then Taysom Hill 6.6 million you could save, and then Demario Davis 5.8 million. But honestly, those are all those players besides Marshawn Lattimore, which I would have no problem with him taking a restructure and saving that 10 million. All those other guys are kind of they're kind of in their early to mid 30s, and I don't think I would be overly thrilled if they continued to restructure and push back their contracts into these uh, dead dead uh, dead cap and things like that, into these fake years and things like that, like they do to add on to contracts to lower the price of them, just because these players are getting kind of up there in age. Cam Jordan, Taysom Hill, Mario Davis, all those guys are 30 plus. So, I mean, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this is Cam Jordan or Demario's last year with the Saints if something wild doesn't happen in this year coming up, unless something wild happens and they actually get cut during the offseason here. And then Taysom Hill, he's probably the most productive player of the three, even though Mario Davis did have a really good season still last year. His tackle numbers and his tackles for loss weren't up quite as much as they had been in previous years, but he did have a career high 6.5 sacks. But I think you could kind of tell that both players, Cam Jordan and Mario Davis, were kind of slowing down a little bit, even though, Cam Jordan once again had 8.5 sacks, not double digit, but still was the leading sacker on the team. But then Taysom Hill, you can't be discriminate too much about the age thing and calling out Cam Jordan and Demario Davis because Taysom Hill is about the same age as those guys. But yeah, I just find it hard to believe that they wouldn't restructure him to guarantee a spot on this team, just because he was one of their most productive offensive weapons last year. So that's just be interesting to see what they do with some of these older players, these veterans, because they're going to have to find that other 30 million somewhere. And then looks like the Saints are close to having a contract extension with Tano Passanio, which I think some people might think that's an indicator that they may not be able to bring Carl Granderson back, or Carl Granderson or Marcus Davenport back. But I don't think that's necessarily a clear indicator of that. Out of those three guys, I probably want Carl Granderson back the most. So, and I don't I think I agree with most people. Most Saints fans agree with me. Probably wouldn't be overly upset with the loss of Marcus Davenport, but I don't think that really them getting an extension signed with him really is a big indicator that those two players are gone because uh, Tano Passanio, his first year when he was starting and came in before he got hurt, he was looking like he was about to have a career year because he had what two and this was in just 8 games in 2021. He had eight played in 8 games and had 5 starts. I think he ended up having like an ankle injury that made him miss half the season. But in those 8 games, he had 2 pass deflections, a forced fumble, 4 sacks, 18 tackles, 14 solo, 4 assists, and 3 tackles for loss, and 8 quarterback hits. So he was looking like he was about to be maybe still someone's job there in 2021, but he didn't seem like he got to play quite as much as he did in that previous year. Even though he did start as many games, he actually did almost play the whole season. He played in 15 games with 5 starts, but he had no pass deflections, no forced fumbles, no fumble recoveries, and only two sacks. But he had more tackles. I guess he was maybe more of more more influenced in the run game because he had 28 tackles, 15 solo, uh, 13 assists, 3 tackles for loss, and 6 quarterback hits. But like I said, I think he's just a depth player that adds depth to the team, and the Saints are familiar with him, and he's only going to be 29 years old, so I'm good with that signing. And like I said, I don't think it really is a big indicator of things to come with some of our other free agent defensive ends. And then, so that's uh, about all that's going on in the news that's directly Saints related. Just a bunch of extensions and or not extensions, but restructures, pay cuts, and possibly an extension. But then we want to talk about. I'm sure everyone. This is this little snippet here that I'll put in at the end here. But yeah, it looks. Derek Carr. I don't know how strong it looks that the Saints are actually going to be his landing spot because man, it seems like the Jets are pretty interested in him, and it's just wild how before he became a free agent and when the Saints were talking to him about trading him and met with him 2 days in a row, it looked like almost a sure thing that he was going to be a Saint. But now it looks like maybe the Jets are the favorite to get him. I guess that's pending on what Aaron Rodgers does, is what a lot of people think. And then I guess it came out that Diana Rossini reported that him and his agent are looking for about 35 million per year. I mean, you already know I'm not a huge Derek Carr fan, but I honestly I don't think the Saints have much options anywhere else. You know, they don't really have a high enough draft pick to get one of the top quarterbacks in the draft coming up, and with the 29th pick, I think they'd have to almost mortgage their whole future to get in the top 5 to get CJ or Bryce Young, CJ Stroud or Bryce Young. So I just don't think that happens, and because of that, I'm good with the Saints' second best option, their best option. Obviously, their best option would be to get a young franchise quarterback, but just to keep them from running it back and starting Andy Dalton for the season again, I'm all for signing him. And honestly, with what Diana Rossini is reporting, 35 per year. I mean, man, just put it. If that's really what they're laying out on the table, if that's true, I mean that doesn't really seem like that much because he was what making 40 million with the Raiders, so he's taken a decent pay cut. So I'm a little surprised that if that's all he's asking for, that some team hasn't already signed him yet. But maybe they feel a little more like I do when it comes to Derek Carr, that he's not he's not a quarterback that can carry a team on his back. Like he's definitely, I mean, like comparing any player to Drew Brees, but he's not a guy that you can be like, well, just because we have Derek Carr, that pretty much guarantees us 7 wins a year. Like he's going to get us 7 years a year. He's going to drag us to 7 years, 7 wins, no matter what. Like that's what Drew Brees was doing in the middle portion of his career with the Saints, and like there's this he was gonna get you at least close to 500, but maybe other teams just don't feel that he's that guy. But if the Jets do, if he does end up signing with the Jets, I kind of question him a little bit of why would you want to stay in the AFC? I mean, why would you want to be in the same division as the Buffalo Bills and the Dolphins and even the Patriots, even though they seem like they're having some issues with what they want to do with Mac Jones. So I mean, it just seemed like it's almost a clear and obvious choice to come to the NFC and sign with an NFC South team, whether it be the Saints or not. It could also be Carolina. It could be the Buccaneers or even the Falcons, just because I mean, nothing's guaranteed. Injuries and things like that play out, and never really know what happens. But you think signing with one of the NFC South teams would almost guarantee him a spot in the playoffs, which he's only ever played one time before because he got hurt in that 2016 season. But yeah, I mean, you think, like I said, you think it'd be just clear and obvious to sign with one of those teams. But yeah, I mean, I'm not following the Derek Carr saga too much. I don't even know if it's really a saga that much. It almost just with the Phil reading the room type of Phil, it almost doesn't feel like they're going to get him. And probably should have known this already, that the Saints weren't going to get him once Cam Jordan started trying to recruit him. Because it seems like every time Cam Jordan tries to recruit a player to the Saints, whether it be OBJ or Jadeveon Clowney and now Derek Carr, the Saints never end up getting them. Or even I can't remember what Cam Jordan said about Deshaun Watson. I think he mentioned that he would have liked the Saints to get Deshaun Watson last year as well. And I think that a lot of people thought that may cause some strain on his and Jameis Winston's relationship, being that he ended up just being their second choice. But yeah, should have pretty much known that the Saints weren't going to get Derek Carr once Cam Jordan started trying to recruit him. But other than that, I mean, there's not really a lot going on. Just following this dead period, really waiting for the free agency to start up in March, and then the draft happens in April. Like that's when things will really start cooking. Most of this stuff's pretty boring for the most part, but gotta keep you up to date and it'd be interesting to see if Derek Carr gets signed, gets his 35 million before free agency starts, because I really don't know if that will help him or hurt him to not be the only veteran quarterback on the market once you have guys like Jimmy Garoppolo and Geno Smith on the market with him, and then there's trade options like maybe Mac Jones and Lamar Jackson, which that would just be a wish, but the Saints would probably have to give up their entire draft to get him. But anyways, I think that's all I have for you. So who dat? And can I get a check?